Hello, my name is Ailsa, and today I'm going to be doing the Time and Place book tag, which was started by Jen Campbell, and I will leave the link down below in the description box. So the idea of this tag is that you pick about 10 books that remind you of a particular time and place, that whenever you pick them up and read through it, you're going to be transported back to that time for some reason. For a lot of these with me, it's the first time I read them, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Just any books that make you think of a particular thing. Like the way that you open a book and you're filled with the memories of that time and place. So, I've got these in roughly chronological order for the time I read them. So let's get started. First of all, I have The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. This book I did not actually read. My mum read this to me and my brother as a bedtime story and entertaining us story when we were very young, and we took our little yacht, which is, that makes it sound very fancy, but it's very, very small inside, just big enough for all four of us to sleep on it, and it had like a little cooking stove and tiny sink to wash up in. It was very small. And we went on a trip that took us round the Isle of Mull, which is on the west coast of Scotland. So Mum read us that, and every time I think of The Hobbit, I think of Mum reading us this story when we were snuggled up in our sleeping bags or sitting on deck and things, getting time for the next bit of the story. And probably this is one of the first books that got me really into fantasy. My parents always read fantasy, so those were the books that were around in the house, and they were always the kind of ones that they read to us. So anyway, first book, The Hobbit, J.R.R. Tolkien. Next up, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. This is one that, to start with, my mum read us this one the first time, me and my brother. And she would read us about a chapter a night, sometimes 2 chapters if they were short. But the bit I remember in particular is right at the end. They go through the trapdoor and they go through all the challenges in there. And then Harry goes through into the last room. And I remember my mum reading the last sentence of this chapter, which was our last one for the night. And it ends, there was already someone there, but it wasn't Snape. It wasn't even Voldemort. And she stopped reading, and we were like, who is it? And then, of course, she went on, and she did read us the next line. It was Quirrell. And then we had to stop for the night, just with that. But I remember that moment of her reading those last couple of lines of that chapter very, very distinctly. I know where in the room she was sitting, things like that. So that's a very, very clear memory, as I had to put that one in. The next book, jumping forward several Harry Potters, to Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. For the launch of this book, they got a bunch, I don't remember how many, they got a lot of young people, teenagers, to go to Edinburgh Castle, and they had projected the Harry Potter stuff up on the wall, and the idea was that these young people would get copies of the book and get to meet J.K. Rowling, and I was one of the people that got chosen. So I went to the castle, we went in horse-drawn carriages, we had a feast, and then we went into the room, and at midnight J.K. Rowling read us an excerpt from the book, which is really, really cool. So this one is my signed copy. Yay, very exciting, which is why this book is in very pristine condition. This is not the one we ever read. So this one, not only did I associate it with that, I met up with a bunch of people who were staying in my hotel who were also at the event, and there are bits of this book that I think of sitting in various bookshops and cafes around Edinburgh, frantically reading on the Saturday. It came out on midnight on Friday night, Saturday morning, and we were then reading it on Saturday. The feast was then Saturday night, and the question and answer with J.K. Rowling, the actual interview that we were meant to write about, was on the Sunday morning. So we all obviously really wanted to read it, but we also wanted to read it before the question and answer session. So I remember sitting with those assorted people from all over the world. I think there were 2 Australians, a British girl, things like that. It was great, sitting in bookshops in Edinburgh reading that. And then I have to put in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. My family each year goes on holiday to this little Scottish island called Tiree. We're actually going there this week, so it's made me think about it. And that's where we were when the last one came out. So as a result, we have about 3 copies of this book, because me and my mum and my dad each wanted to read it straight away, and we knew we wouldn't have the patience to wait. So this one, I remember sitting reading it in a tiny little room, looking out over the sea and the waves crashing on the on the rocks just next to the house. So I remember sitting there reading these last few chapters of the Harry Potter story. I am doing a reread of the whole Harry Potter series just now. I will do the Harry Potter tag when I get to the end of my reread. If you want to follow along with that, I'm talking about it on Twitter and I'm using the hashtag HPReread. If you are interested in hearing my thoughts at the end of each book, I can make videos of that or posts about it. Let me know in the comments. But yeah, I'm rereading them and I'm on the first book just now, and it's a lot of fun seeing all the little details that you don't notice the first time. And also I've actually only read this one time through, so I'm really looking forward to reading it again and seeing stuff that maybe went by me the first time, because I'm sure there's a lot of that. So I'm excited about that. Moving on a little bit from there, Sunshine by Robin McKinley. This one is one of my comfort reads. I read it when I need cheering up, when I'm stressed and I need to relax. It is quite creepy in places. It is a story about a vampire and other monsters. It's about a girl who works in a bakery and then gets kidnapped and then helps a vampire escape, and he helps her escape. And then they have to figure out where they're going from there, because vampires and humans do not get along. That is not a thing that happens in any way, shape or form. I bought it on one of the weekends that I'd been with my mum and one of my friends. We had been up to St Andrews to look around the university when I was deciding where I wanted to apply for universities, and I found it in the bookshop there, and I remember reading it in the car on the way home. This is what makes me think of then, of choosing universities, and it's also just my comfort book. It's a lot of happy memories of places I've read it. Just after I finished high school, I went travelling around Europe, and I bought in a bookshop there a book called The Shakespeare Secret, which is like a conspiracy story based around the works of Shakespeare and finding one of his first folio editions and things. And it sees the characters starting in London and then going around various places. And I was definitely reading it for the most part in high summer in Budapest, and it was really hot, and I was carrying it around with me. I remember walking around all these little alleyways that there are in Budapest, and finding little squares to read in the sun, and stretching out my meal time so I could sit and people watch and read my book a bit longer and things. And that was a really good book for the time. The next book we come to then is, jumping forward in time again, On Dublin Street by Samantha Young. I read this, I think, at the start of the summer before I went into my final year of university. And the book is set in Edinburgh, which by that point I knew really well. It's about a college student who just graduated from university. She's moving out of her flat that she shared with a college friend, and she's moving into a new flat somewhere else in town and meets this guy, and she's getting set up in a new job, and getting started off into her new life. And I read this as I was going into my final year. The location of the flat she moves out of is literally the same street or just around the corner from the flat that I lived in my fourth year. I love the places that are described in this book. It's another. I talked the other day in my review of Natural Causes about how much I love reading books set in places I know very well, and this book it brings Edinburgh to life so well. I love the way it describes it. It talks about different streets here and there. I loved seeing that aspects of her story, the fact that she's finished university and is now taking her first steps in the world. That sort of resonated with me, but it is always going to make me think of living in that particular flat in Edinburgh and warm summery days, walking along streets back to my flat there. And that's another one that I'd really recommend people go read. If you like your contemporary romance with a lot of emotions, that one made me cry a lot in different times, but it is a happy ending eventually. The next book I'm coming to is Written in Red by Anne Bishop. I was in America last summer for a little while. I needed a book to read on the beach that wasn't a big heavy one. I found this in a bookshop over there in a Barnes & Noble. I'd heard some things about it, heard it was good, and I started reading it on the beach, and it was really good, and I kept reading it because I wanted to keep reading, and I got such bad sunburn. I was bright red all down the back of my legs. I really had to sit down for days. It was dreadful. This is a really good story, and it's a really fun story, but it is always going to make me think of reading on a beach near Charleston and getting so sunburned. One of the things Jen said in her video, I think, was that physical books take on these memories and change shape and things almost as they collect our memories and things as you go along, but you don't get that with an ebook. I'm going to disagree and say that this one is Brighton Belle by Sarah Sheridan. I really hope you can see that, holding it right up there for the camera. And I travelled in Spain last autumn for a while. I took a paperback book with me, a little small one, but I also took my phone instead of taking my laptop, and it meant that I could read on there. And it's not ideal reading on a tiny screen. It meant I could walk around the city and explore and see things without carrying a massive book around with me. So that one makes me think of these various cities I stayed in Spain, in particular one inland that maybe people haven't heard of called Zaragoza, which has a lot of Roman history actually. I remember waiting for the market to open again in the afternoon. It closed in the middle of the day, and I remember sitting on the steps of the market reading this book and sitting in squares by pretty fountains and reading it. So that's a book that's going to remind me of those whenever I do reread it. My final book is one of those ones that has really been transformed by me reading it. I don't know how well you can see that, but it's all rumpled up there. It's uneven on the sides. On the end it's got some colour transfer on there. It's green. This is Blood Trade by Faith Hunter. It's part of Jane Yellowrock series, which is an urban fantasy series. Last summer there was the Commonwealth Games was held in Glasgow in Scotland. And I had a job working in hospitality in the Athletes Village, which is the compound where all the athletes stayed before their events and after their events, and I was serving food at this kind of outdoor barbecue area. So we did get to meet a ton of athletes, and I was reading this book on my lunch breaks. I would finish work around 4 o'clock, so I had time to go and see some things that were on in the evenings occasionally when there were evening events. My dad texted me at lunchtime and said, "What are you doing tonight? Do you want to come and see the medal games for the women's hockey?" And I said, yes, of course, I'd love to go and see that, especially as I think Wales were competing. So I went along to this game, and somewhere in the afternoon it started raining. And I walked there from where I was working because it was the quickest way to get there. And I was rather wet by the time I met my dad. I had my bag with me, and I had this in my bag. I held my arms over the bag for the whole time we were at the game. We were there for, I'm going to say, at least 3 hours, probably more like 4, in the pouring rain. We watched the ceremonies. It was a really great evening. This is what my book, it was a lot thicker, more wrinkled than this when I took it out, and very wet and an unhappy book. So I squashed it down between some others, and you can see that it's still very wrinkly. But the wrinkles help me remember that. So it reminds me of a really great time in my summer last year. So those are my books that make me think of a specific time and place. I will link down below to Jen Campbell and her original tag video. If you would like to take part in this and you're watching, consider yourselves tagged. I'm not going to tag anyone specifically. But let me know if you do take part in it, and I would love to watch your videos. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon.